I would say I would rather describe the role as such. That means that as this is a small market we are talking about when we talk about the Czech documentaries, Czech television, and the television as such is one of rare sources of income as well as financing for the documentary films and the documentary filmmaker, and that means that the TV, the state fund for support of cinematography, are two pillars that more or less all the documentaries are ending up with. And this is something that has been the trend and role some 10-15 years ago when we started with the IDF, and I would say this is more or less also today. But then we can say that there is various other channels of distribution. There are some additional funds and fundings that appeared in the meanwhile, but these are two still the strongest pillars that all the major creative author films start with and that end up with. I would say that there is, if we would take into consideration the real numbers and the percentages, I would say that generally there is less and less interest in what we are dealing majorly with, and this is creative and author documentaries, author-driven documentaries. This is where I would say film festivals and let's say VOD and crowdfunding are playing bigger role than before. But on the other hand, if I would come back to Czech Republic and maybe I could say Poland, I think that still you cannot avoid this huge, strong role of a TV as a co-producer. But then there are a little bit of more pressure than before in terms of when you are author who wants to really creatively approach the topic. So that means that I would say authors who want to more create the film as from his own or her own point of view are being put under more pressure. But there is a still path how to avoid it. But for newcomers, I would say it's in general more hard than before. I think it still does not shows any bigger numbers in terms of income for the producer or for the author. But on the other hand, I think that the PR and advertising role of it, putting the film on VOD, it's bigger than before because audience is more used to search for the films in internet than before. So in terms of making your image to be heard of, seen and known in the community, the role increased, I would say, but still there is not a model or a business model that would assure producer to earn bigger amounts through internet. I think this is these are the fees that are really just supportive to the budget eventually for the next film, or just smaller amounts in general. Most of the documentary you can meet here on EastDoc platform or in our workshop, Ex Oriente Film Workshop, or the ones who came here just for the East European Forum. In general, I would say that they would find a classical financing more or less, that they would have some kind of a state support from an institute or fund in their country. They will combine it with the TV or some other fund, a little bit of in-kind from the producer, and this kind of a classical documentary co-production story. There will be exceptions, but more or less this is how it goes. And all these institutions giving you support ask you something in return, and more or less there are always rules that doesn't give you freedom, so to say, to give freely your film on all the levels of a distribution channel at one time. That means that it gives you kind of a timetable that you should go first for the cinema, after some time and some holdback you go to TV, and then you can go for the video on demand, and you cannot go free, but you have to go for video on demand, which is paid for, etc. So I think this is what you ask about. It's a kind of a rare situation in Europe most often, and maybe this is rather or example for states where very often people are financing their own film and then do acquisition with it, or then sell it and then go out with it. So far more classical documentaries in terms of financing and how to build up production are not still used to this kind of distribution model.